Right now, because of response to intervention or RTI, there's a lot of progress monitoring going on in classrooms and especially in early grade classrooms. And for a good reason. We're trying to catch kids who might be having difficulty with reading as early as possible. However, one of the things we want to consider is, are the measures that were designed for native speakers, perhaps for these early benchmarking that we're doing with learners, appropriate for our English language learners? And so I would respond to that with a resounding no, because some of the measures that I see in the early grades are not appropriate for a second language learner, and it makes sense why they're not appropriate for a second language learner. Given that Spanish speakers make up a good proportion of English language learners in most of our districts and states, if you take the case of Spanish, a task like letter naming, if the learner comes into an early grade, let's say first or second, and they know the names of letters in Spanish, how would they know different names, the different names that we give those same letters in English? It's inappropriate. They have a name for the letter, it's just not the name we're expecting. And it's also not important how you name the letter unless you're spelling out loud to someone to, like, say, spell your name. That's when you need a letter name. Otherwise, you never need a letter name. You just need to know how to decode it. And another task that I find very inappropriate in the early grades for English learners is a fluency benchmark. Because why should a second language reader be fluent? They're not going to be fluent, just as anyone who's ever studied a second language knows. To read fluently, that's a later stage, a later proficiency expectation. We can have a fluency expectation, but not until they're intermediate or advanced. And so what are we going to monitor? What should we monitor? Well, I think it's appropriate to monitor sight word learning, regular phonetic decoding as it's taught, maybe letter sound as it's taught, but not in isolation. And also comprehension is the most important thing to be monitoring, and vocabulary development. So if I have a set of vocabulary or sight words or regular phonics that I'm trying to teach, then I can monitor for the acquisition of that. Unfortunately, we have not set those benchmarks to know second language benchmarks. What would those be? And so we default to the native language benchmarks. And a real key here is to monitor who's in intensive interventions, who gets categorized as in need of intensive intervention. And so just using something like a fluency benchmark or letter naming, some kids are in intensive intervention because by the middle of first grade, they haven't met their benchmarks and they're second language learners, yet it's an inappropriate benchmark, and they're ending up in urgent intervention or intensive intervention in high proportions. So if you see in your district or your school a lot of L's in intensive intervention, it's almost screaming at you. You probably have an inappropriate benchmark because look who it's catching. It's catching this certain group. And that's when we know there's bias involved in the measure that we're using. So I think it's really, really important for reading specialists, for classroom teachers, for principals, for everyone to be on the same page as to what's different about second language reading so that we don't inappropriately carry over benchmarks designed for native speakers who already have the oral language and are just adding literacy over to second language learners who are developing all language systems, oral language, reading, and writing.